There are words meant to shake you from your sleep, not of the body, but of the soul. And this is one of them. You, yes, you, the one carrying invisible weights, the one whose strength has been tested in silence. You are not forgotten. You are not lost in the crowd. You are chosen. If you've ever asked God, why me, or whispered in the night, am I still seen, then this message is heaven's reply. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey you won't just hear a message. You'll feel a stirring. You'll awaken to the strength you never knew you carried. Today we step into a conversation that doesn't begin in comfort, but in questioning. Why does this battle feel unending? Why does breakthrough remain just beyond reach? Why does my soul feel like it's holding on by a thread? And more quietly, more painfully, where is God when I feel overlooked? If these questions echo in the corners of your spirit, you are not alone. In fact, you're precisely where awakening begins. I have walked through that desert of doubt, and what I've discovered is this: God is not absent in the silence. He is forming something. Hidden within the pressure beneath the rubble of delay is a strength ancient, divine, and uniquely yours. This isn't a lesson in pretending to be strong. It's an unveiling of what has always been there, planted by the hands of God Himself. We'll speak of spiritual resilience, of divine identity, and of what it means to be a vessel forged in the unseen furnace. There is a strength not built by effort, but awakened by encounter. And today, as we explore this awakening, you will not just learn, you will remember who you've always been in Him. This is not a sermon for your mind alone. It is a pilgrimage of the heart. As we move through every word and every silence in between, you are being invited into more than comfort. You're being summoned into clarity. Not every battle is proof of weakness. Some are signs of preparation. This message will walk you through the terrain of holy wrestlings and into the revelation of your true design. You'll come face to face with the parts of yourself you've buried and the promises of God you thought were lost to time. Don't skip ahead. Don't walk away halfway. There is a fullness waiting, but only for those who journey through it all. This is about alignment with heaven's timing, about reawakening what adversity tried to bury. You're not here by accident. You were drawn by a whisper too sacred to ignore. And now your feet stand at the edge of awakening. We begin your journey now. There was a time when I stood in defiance of the very God I now call Father, not out of hatred, but hunger. I searched through intellect, through literature, through all the chambers of logic and philosophy, trying to make sense of the ache that nothing in the world could explain. I wasn't angry at God. I simply didn't believe He was there. And yet, in the quiet moments when the applause of reason faded and the night stretched long, I felt it. The whisper of something more. Not a theory, not a story, but a presence. You see, faith didn't come to me in a blaze of glory. It came through wrestling, through questions that refused easy answers, through late-night conversations with friends like Tolkien, where myth began to bleed into truth, and stories once dismissed as fantasy suddenly pulsed with eternity. I did not wake up one morning convinced. I was pursued, slowly, relentlessly, lovingly. The God I denied did not retaliate. He waited, not as a judge, but as a father, not to argue, but to awaken. And when He did, it shattered everything I thought I knew. It wasn't a moment of clarity. It was a breaking. I had built my identity on intellect, on scholarship, on being a man of sense. But faith, true faith, asked me to lay it all down, not to abandon reason, but to kneel before something higher than reason, something holy, something terrifying in its beauty. My conversion wasn't a leap. It was a surrender, and surrender is never clean. It is messy, honest, undeniably real. I remember the night I finally gave in, not with eloquence, but with honesty. I was the most reluctant convert in all of England, dragged into the kingdom, kicking and struggling, eyes wide open and heart finally unguarded. And in that moment, I was not met with rebuke. I was met with rest. I was not silenced. I was known. What followed was not comfort but calling. For when God awakens your soul, He also assigns your steps. My pen, once used to defend doubt, became a tool to unveil wonder. Each word I wrote after that was a kind of offering, a way to articulate the invisible world I had once rejected. I spoke not to convert minds, but to reach hearts, not to build arguments, but to build bridges, because I knew what it meant to stand on the other side, lonely, brilliant, empty. And so I began to write of lions and wardrobes, of devils, and letters of pain and love, and all the paradoxes that make us human. Because faith is not a fortress for the flawless, it is a haven for the honest. You do not enter because you are whole. You enter because you are haunted by the desire to be. Here is what I've learned, and I offer it to you now. You are not beyond reach. You are not too intellectual, too skeptical, too wounded. You are not too late. The very places you believe disqualify you, those are the places He longs to touch. Faith isn't born where we feel strongest. It begins in the fracture. It rises from the wound. It wasn't the grandeur of religion that changed me. It was the gentle mercy of truth, the kind that knows your name when you no longer know who you are, the kind that finds you in an Oxford room, surrounded by books, and yet starving for meaning, the kind that speaks not to impress you, but to resurrect you. You stayed through the silence. You remained through the storms. And whether you knew it or not, He never left. You didn't survive to tell a sad story. You were preserved to tell a sacred one. The story of how eternity came close and whispered, "You are mine." So, if you're wondering whether faith is still possible after all the disappointment, after all the betrayal, after all the delay, I offer you my life as evidence, not of perfection but of pursuit, not of clarity but of covenant. God is not impressed by your defenses. He is drawn to your honesty. And when you drop the mask, even just for a moment, He will meet you there. You are not forgotten. You are not unseen. You are not the sum of your questions. You are the echo of divine intention. You are the child whose doubts do not cancel their destiny. You are the one whose cracks make room for the light. You are not on the outside looking in. You are already being invited home. This journey is not for the faint of heart, but it is for the willing, for those who dare to believe that behind their ache is an author, that behind their longing is love itself. And I, once an atheist, once a skeptic, once a man armored in intellect, am living proof that God is not intimidated by the mind. He created it, and He uses it, but He reaches beyond it into the place where truth becomes more than thought. It becomes transformation. So walk on, even if you walk trembling, even if you walk with wounds. The ground beneath your feet is sacred, not because it is perfect, but because He walks it with you. And when you arrive at that holy realization that the God you once questioned has been walking beside you the whole time, you will know what it means to awaken. You will know what it means to believe. I never set out to write a children's fantasy series. In fact, I resisted it at first. But grace has a way of showing up disguised as imagination. And sometimes it is in the simplest stories told to young hearts that the deepest truths find their home. The Chronicles of Narnia was born not from ambition, but from a longing to give shape to what I knew in my soul, but could never fully say in plain speech. I needed to paint it with wonder, wrap it in story, hide it in allegory. Because the sacred often slips past the intellect and speaks directly to the spirit. I wrote Narnia for the child who still remembers how to believe, and for the adult who has forgotten. I wrote it for the one who hears the roar of a lion in their dreams and wonders if it's real. For the weary soul looking for a lamppost in the middle of a snow-covered wood, hoping that somewhere beyond the ordinary eternity waits. It wasn't a mere fairy tale. It was a key. And those who used it, those who stepped through the wardrobe, discovered it wasn't a story they were entering. It was a reflection, a revelation, a return. You see, the world will try to convince you that only what you see is real, but I have learned through reason, through revelation, through the sacred ache in the heart, that the invisible is more real than we dare admit. Narnia was my attempt to whisper that truth, to say what theology sometimes cannot, that you are not just flesh. You are fire and glory and divine intention, that battles are real even if they are unseen, that courage still matters, that evil exists but it does not get the final word, that a lion still roars. Aslan, he was never just a character, he was a glimpse of a king whose love cannot be explained, only encountered. He is not safe, as I wrote, but he is good. That line was not crafted, it was received. Because when you have stood in the presence of the holy, you know, God is not tame. He is not predictable, but he is utterly trustworthy. You are not forgotten in his eyes. You are not too small, too foolish, too far gone. You are the one he calls, the one he crowns, the one he leads through the darkest woods to discover light again. Every child who reads Narnia walks away changed. But so does every adult who dares to read it with open heart, because it isn't childish to dream. It is divine. It isn't weakness to weep for Aslan's sacrifice. It is worship. And it isn't foolish to believe in resurrection. It is the foundation of all things eternal. You are not naive to hope. You are prophetic. You are not immature to imagine. You are awakening. You are not escaping. You are returning to who you were always meant to be. And that is the secret. Narnia is not just a land. It is a mirror of the kingdom, of the battle for the soul, of the journey from bondage to glory. It is filled with talking beasts and magical trees, but make no mistake, it is also filled with the cry of every human heart, "Take me home," and the answer of a lion who replies, "I already have." You stayed through the dark winter of doubt. You remained even when belief was buried under the snow. And now spring returns not because you earned it, but because love always finds a way. Through Lucy's wonder, Peter's courage, Susan's doubts, Edmund's redemption, I wove every part of the journey we all must walk, the falling, the rising, the breaking, the healing. I wrote not as one who had it all figured out, but as one who had walked through despair and still dared to believe. I wrote as one who had stood on the edge of atheism and found not emptiness, but a king waiting. And if you read those books and feel a stirring that is not fiction, that is invitation. You are not disqualified by your failure. Edmund was not. You are not invisible because you question. Susan was not. You are not less worthy because you feel small. Lucy changed a world by believing. These characters, they are not just characters. They are fragments of us, of me, of every soul trying to find the courage to follow the whisper of something beyond the veil. And that whisper is not silence. It is the sound of destiny calling you back. What Narnia teaches, if you dare to hear, is that the real world is not confined to walls and maps and timelines. The real world is where God walks with us in disguise, where divine strength is awakened in ordinary people, where every scar has meaning, where every defeat can be rewritten. It wasn't about escape. It was about encounter. It wasn't fantasy. It was faith clothed in wonder. So, if you've ever closed the book and sighed, not from sadness but from remembrance, that was the point. You remember that you were made for more, that you've heard the voice before, that somewhere deep inside the lion is still on the move, and so are you. Not to a land with swords and spells, but to a calling with weight and wonder. You are not drifting. You are being summoned. You are not wasting time. You are walking toward eternity. And when the final pages turn, when the stories all seem to end, that is when the real story begins. For Aslan told them, and I tell you now, the adventures in Narnia were only the cover and title page. The true story starts now, the one that goes on forever, where every chapter is better than the one before. You are not at the end. You are at the edge of glory. You are not walking alone. The author is beside you, writing every step, whispering every word. And he is not finished. Not with Narnia. Not with me. Not with you. I have always believed that fiction at its best is not an escape from reality, but an unveiling of it. The Space Trilogy was my answer to a different kind of longing, not the child's yearning for magic, as with Narnia, but the adult's ache for meaning in a world that seems bent towards self-destruction. It began not as a desire to write science fiction, but as a response to the unspoken despair I saw creeping through the corridor of human progress. We had conquered machines, reached for stars, built empires of intellect, and yet something was missing. Not power, not knowledge, but wisdom, wonder, worship. The first book, Out of the Silent Planet, began with a question. What if space was not a void but a chorus? What if the silence we imagined between stars was not emptiness but exile? And what if Earth was not the pinnacle of life, but the one wounded world cut off from the great music of the heavens? It wasn't science that drove me. It was theology. It was poetry. It was the sobering belief that evil does not begin in action but in perception, how we view ourselves, how we view the cosmos, how we view the divine. You are not just a product of time and chance. You are not a random drift of molecules. You are a soul suspended between choices that shape eternity. And so was Ransom, my reluctant protagonist. A philologist by trade, a man not seeking glory. He did not volunteer for greatness. He was taken into it. And in his journey, I told my own. Not on a spaceship, but in the spaces of my mind, once hostile to heaven, now yielded to it. Ransom stood where I had once stood, questioning, fearing, then slowly beholding. The second book, Paralandra, was where the fire deepened. A planet unfallen, a woman untouched by sin, a garden not yet ruined, and in the middle of it, the same voice that once whispered in Eden returns not with horns and fangs, but with intellect, with argument, with poisoned poetry. Evil rarely enters screaming. It arrives with logic, with suggestions that sound harmless. It was not a battle of swords. It was a battle of words. And Ransom stood not to conquer but to contend, to hold the line against the lie, to bleed if need be for the sake of innocence. You stayed even when others fled. You remained even when it made no sense. That is what Ransom did. That is what redemption often requires. Not brilliance, not fame, but faithfulness. You are not called because you are unbreakable. You are called because you're willing. And in that willingness, God does what flesh cannot. Paralandra taught me something I carry still, that good is not passive. It must speak. It must risk. It must at times fight. And evil, though seductive, though smooth, does not create. It only twists. You are not the twisted version of something holy. You are the original dream of God waiting to be awakened. Your battle is not against flesh, not even against your past. It is against the shadows that try to tell you light has forgotten your name. But light remembers always. By the time I reached that hideous strength, the final book, I was no longer writing from speculation. I was writing from warning. The world I painted was not on a distant planet. It was England, familiar, respected, and yet infected. The battle between good and evil was no longer out there, it was here. It was the subtle compromise of conscience, the seductive charm of power wrapped in bureaucracy and polite tyranny, the evil that destroys not with rage, but with reason. And again, it was not brute strength that resisted it. It was humility, prayer, obedience to a voice larger than the system. You are not powerless in the face of evil. You are not voiceless in a culture that confuses noise for truth. You are the echo of heaven's decree. Light still shines. Truth still speaks. God still reigns. The trilogy was in its own strange way a theology of resistance, against darkness, against despair, against the narrative that says this is just the way the world is. No, my friend, the world is broken, yes, but it is not forsaken. It is under siege, but not abandoned. You are not a bystander in this war. You are chosen, called, commissioned. And here's what I have learned through every character, every planet, every sentence. Evil may appear brilliant, but it is never eternal. Darkness may spread quickly, but it cannot create. It only corrupts. And those who stand in truth, even trembling, stand taller than empires built on lies. You are not standing alone. Heaven watches. Heaven fights. Heaven knows your name. You are not too late. You are not too weary. You are not too flawed to be entrusted with purpose. You are the one still listening, still discerning, still believing that perhaps there is more, and that more is not myth but meaning. You stayed curious. You remained open. And now you are ready. The space trilogy was never about Mars or Venus or the machinery of space. It was about the soul. About how the smallest choices ripple into the cosmos, about how obedience, even in obscurity, shakes the kingdom of darkness. You are not too small to matter. Your faith, your yes, your refusal to bow, these things resound louder than thunder in heaven's courts. It wasn't fiction. It was frame. It wasn't escape. It was encounter. And the truth remains. The war between light and dark is not won by those with the loudest voices, but by those whose hearts are anchored beyond the stars. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are still part of the resistance. You are not standing at the edge of a story. You are inside it. And the author, Holy Wild Unshakable, has already written the ending. And it is good. Truth, I discovered, is often best revealed in reverse. When I wrote the Screwtape Letters, I did not do so as a man with clean hands, but as one who had wrestled deeply personally with the voices within, the voices that whisper when the world is quiet, the ones that nudge, suggest, distort. They do not shout, they scheme. I had heard them, not in visions, but in the everyday doubts, the subtle compromises, the almost justified sins. And I realized, if I could write what those voices sound like from the other side, perhaps the faithful would begin to hear them for what they are. Screwtape was not a character I admired. He was a mask I wore so you could see the enemy's face. He was satire, yes, but also revelation. Because the devil rarely appears in horror. He often appears in habit. He doesn't need to possess you. He only needs to distract you, to dull your senses, to normalize apathy, to keep you busy enough with religion that you forget relationship. That is how the soul is stolen, not in fire, but in fog. You are not a pawn. You are not defenseless. You are not too small for hell to notice. The truth is, you matter so much that darkness studies you, but grace claims you louder still. If Screwtape taught me anything, it's that spiritual warfare is rarely dramatic. It's domestic. It lives in daily choices. In the moment, you choose silence over prayer, convenience over obedience, control over surrender. The battlefield is not always visible, but it is always real. Through Screwtape's letters to his young nephew Wormwood, I tried to expose the anatomy of temptation, how fear is twisted into prudence, how pride disguises itself as wounded dignity, how laughter when bent just slightly can erode awe. It wasn't fantasy, it was commentary. I watched how quickly we can be lulled into numbness, how easily we abandon the sacred for the subtle. You are not exempt from that drift, neither am I. And that's why I wrote as the enemy, because sometimes hearing his lies out loud reveals them as lies. It wasn't the cleverness of the demons that haunted me most. It was their coldness, their detachment from joy, their utter absence of love. In crafting them, I saw more clearly what they had lost and what we must guard. You stayed faithful when no one else saw. You remained devoted even when your prayers seemed unanswered. That quiet faith, that holy stubbornness is what Screwtape fears most, because that kind of soul cannot be manipulated. That kind of soul is anchored. Screwtape's genius is subtlety. He does not demand rebellion. He suggests delay. He does not scream, "Reject God." He whispers, "Do it tomorrow." He doesn't call you to hatred. He lures you into indifference. But you are not indifferent. You are still searching, still hungry, still aching for something more than comfort. And that hunger is sacred. It is the beginning of awakening. It is the flame Screwtape cannot snuff out. You are not too broken to be awakened. You are not too flawed to be fought for. You are not forgotten in your private struggles. The enemy knows your name, but so does your Father. And while hell strategizes, heaven sings. You are not defined by the tactics used against you. You are defined by the one who stood for you, bloody breathing love into your rebellion, covering every place Screwtape tried to claim. The Screwtape Letters is a strange book, I admit it. It offers no hero. It gives no happy ending, but it opens a window, one that lets you see how easily light can be dimmed if not guarded. I did not write it to frighten you. I wrote it to awaken you, to make you aware that the dullness you feel in prayer, the hesitancy in worship, the suspicion toward joy, these are not neutral. They are tactical, and you are not losing your mind. You are being targeted. But even more than that, you are being preserved, watched over, protected. God is not distant in your temptations. He is present, and He is patient. You stayed when you could have walked away. You kept believing even with bruised faith. And that is what Screwtape cannot comprehend, that grace grows in surrender, that weakness becomes a weapon when placed in God's hands, that the very soul He mocked becomes the sanctuary He fears. There is power in knowing your enemy, not to glorify him, but to expose him. The Screwtape Letters is my attempt to strip away his camouflage, to remind you that he is not creative, he only counterfeits, that his accusations hold no power when truth is your defense, that his most dangerous weapon is your silence, but your song can still rise. You are not voiceless, you are not weak, you are not alone in your resistance. You are the one still standing, the one still praying, the one still fighting when no one sees. And that kind of soul shakes the kingdom of hell. You are not a victim. You are a vessel, not of fear but of fire, not of defeat but of divine design. Screwtape can write his letters, but God has written your name, and that ink does not fade. So, if you feel small today, remember, Screwtape would rather you stay asleep, stay busy, stay comfortable, but you were born to burn with truth. You were crafted to carry something too heavy for shame, too holy for compromise. You are not the sum of your temptations. You are the story of His triumph, and no demon's strategy can rewrite that. It wasn't satire for satire's sake. It was sacred provocation. And if these twisted letters have stirred something in you, if they've made you pause, reconsider, reflect, then the purpose is fulfilled. Because the enemy is not afraid of your sin. He's afraid of your awareness, your repentance, your return. You are not beyond that return. You are not too far to come home. You are not what the enemy has labeled you. You are what God has declared my child, my beloved, my chosen. The screw tape letters was never about the demons. It was always about you. About the dignity you carry, the glory you forgot, the war you are winning even when it feels like you're losing. You are not finished. You are being fortified. You are not lost. You are being led. And screw tape, he knows it. So walk in, warrior. Your faith is not foolish. Your hope is not naive. The battle is real, but so is the victory. And the one who walks beside you has already crushed the liar's head. The letters have ended, but your story is just beginning. I once dreamed of a bus, not a majestic chariot of light, not a flaming whirlwind. A bus, departing from the gray streets of a place without joy, without laughter, without time. A place where people cling to shadows, convinced they are substance. That place, I realized, was not simply hell as the fire and brimstone sermons had painted. It was something quieter, sadder, and far more familiar. It was the echo of a soul that chooses self over surrender, isolation over intimacy, pride over paradise. The Great Divorce is not a tale of final destinations. It is a story of decisions, of moments that seem small but weigh eternal. I wrote it as an allegory, yes, but every character on that bus was drawn from a truth I've seen in the mirror and in the world. We do not simply wake up in heaven or hell. We become the kind of person who would either kneel before grace or refuse it even when it stands right in front of us. The journey begins in shadows. A city where no one gets along, but everyone gets their way. Where houses stretch endlessly because no soul can bear to live close to another. You are not forgotten in that place, but you are alone. That is hell's signature. Not torment, but separation. Not screams, but silence. And yet, a bus waits. A chance. A door still open. You are not trapped. You are invited. The bus ride is strange, yes, but the destination, it breaks the heart open. Heaven is not less real than earth. It is more. The grass cuts your feet because you're not solid enough to bear it. The light is weighty, almost unbearable. The people who live there, they shine with a brilliance that no flesh can imitate. You stayed in the shadows long enough. You remained in sorrow and self-justification and cycles of bitterness. But the invitation is still extended. Come further up. Come further in. You are not too damaged to enter, but you must lay down what will not cross the threshold. You cannot bring your excuses into glory. You cannot carry your bitterness into eternity. You must let it go. And oh, how we wrestle with that. In the book, some characters step off the bus and turn back, not because they are barred, but because they will not release what is killing them. They cling to offenses, to reputations, to idols, to control. They would rather have their own truth than God's reality. It wasn't God's judgment that turned them away. It was their refusal to be healed. You are not turned away at the gate. You are not told you're too much or not enough. You are invited to be made whole. But healing requires surrender, and surrender feels like dying until you realize it's the only way to truly live. I watched in that dream souls struggle with the light. Some accepted it, others recoiled. One man held on to his self-righteousness like armor, another to his victimhood, another to his reputation. They could not bear the weight of truth. They called it unfair. They called it unreasonable. But grace is not unfair. It is unearned, You don't get to carry your version of yourself into eternity. You carry only what grace has redeemed. You are not your wounds. You are not your anger. You are not the sum of what others did to you. You are more. You are mine. That is the whisper behind every choice in the story. You stayed in the dark because it felt familiar. You remained in the fog because it demanded nothing, but now the sun rises. And your name is still written in love. There's a moment in the book I return to, often a ghost, whose shame has built a wall between himself and joy. But a great shining spirit appears, arms wide open. The ghost can come. He only needs to stop hiding. And still he refuses. Not because he isn't loved, but because he cannot believe he is. You are not beyond the reach of grace. You are not so broken that heaven forgets you. But you must stop running. Stop defending. Stop pretending. The truth will hurt before it heals. But you are being healed into something unshakable. The great divorce is not about earning heaven. It's about choosing it. Again and again and again. In the small, quiet places. When no one sees. When no one claps. When your pride screams for attention but your soul whispers surrender. You are not made to live in gray. You are made for glory. Not one day, but now. You stayed because you were scared to step forward. You remained because you thought the pain made you unworthy. But here is the truth that burns brighter than any lie. You are not too far gone. You are not disqualified. You are not stuck in the bus station between two worlds. You have a seat. You have a destination. But only you can decide to step into the light. And it is a terrible beauty, that light. It exposes, it humbles, but it also heals. It reveals not your shame, but your splendor. You are not a ghost. You are a glory bearer. You are not fading. You are becoming. That is the ache behind every page I wrote. The ache to see souls awaken to who they truly are. This is not a book of condemnation. It is a portrait of mercy, of how far heaven will bend to reach a heart. But love will never force itself. You are not forced to stay in your prison, but the door must be opened from within. And so the bus still runs. Even now, the invitation is not old. It is eternal. Get on. Come see what real is, what solid is, what saved feels like. You will not regret letting go. You will only regret delaying the joy that has been waiting for you since before time began. You are not what your worst day says you are. You are what the King sees when he calls you child. You are not defined by who left. You are defined by the one who stayed. You are not the gray town. You are the garden growing in full color. You are not alone. You are called. You are loved. And the bus is waiting. I wrote many books in my lifetime. Stories of lions and wardrobes of devil and deception, of stars and silence. But till we have faces. This was different. This one came from the deepest place. It came not from wonder but from wounding. Not from imagination, but from ache. I called it my best work, not because it pleased the crowd, but because it tore something open in me. Because it told a truth too sacred to name plainly, a truth about love and how often we twist it. About pain and how often we worship it. About God and how long we resent him before we ever recognize his face. This was my retelling of the myth of Cupid and Psyche. But it was not about gods and legends. It was about the soul, yours, mine. It was about the voices we raise against heaven, the accusations we build over a lifetime, and the shocking silence that often comes in return. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was a confession. The story is told through Orwell. A woman disfigured, hidden behind a veil, hidden even more behind the illusion of control. She is not the hero. She is the mirror. She is the one who loves fiercely but possessively. The one who gives but always expects something in return. The one who demands truth but resents it when it costs her comfort. I knew her well. She was not invented. She was excavated. And here is where the story begins to draw close. Orjual believes she is the victim. She believes she has loved more deeply than anyone else. She believes that the gods, if they exist, are cruel, distant, unjust. She writes her complaint across the pages, desperate for a reckoning. You are not alone if you've felt this. You are not weak if you've cried those same indictments. Why the silence, God? Why the pain? Why the betrayal? You stayed faithful. You remained present. And still the heavens felt closed. But what Orjual and what I had to learn was this: it wasn't that the gods refused to answer. It was that we were not ready to hear. Not until we lay down the masks. Not until we stop rehearsing the story, where we are always the wounded one, always the wrong, always the misunderstood. It wasn't punishment. It was unveiling. It wasn't abandonment. It was invitation to see finally with unveiled face. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. But sometimes your pain speaks so loudly it drowns out the whisper of truth. Orjual thought she knew love, but it was love that controlled, love that consumed, love that demanded. And when Psyche, the sister she claimed to protect, chose mystery over certainty, faith over proof, trust over fear, Orjual called it madness. She could not see that it was holiness. You are not too broken to see beauty, but sometimes we clutch our hurt so tightly that we miss the miracle right before us. You stayed in the shadows because you thought they protected you. You remained behind the veil because you feared rejection. But the great tragedy is not that we wear masks. It's that we start to believe they are our faces. And that is the question the story asks again and again. When will we speak truthfully, not to others but to God? When will we stop accusing and start listening? When will we stop trying to justify our wounds and begin to expose them to light? Orjual writes her book as a case against the gods. And then, in the moment of revelation, she is given a strange and painful gift. Her own words read back to her. But this time, she hears them clearly, sees the self-deception, the pride cloaked in sorrow, the fear hidden in anger, and for the first time she drops the veil. She does not become Psyche. She does not erase her failures. She becomes herself finally, truly. You are not loved because you are perfect. You are loved because you are known. You are not healed by pretending to be whole. You are healed by surrendering the fractures. You are not asked to earn your place. You are asked to bring your face. That is what "till we have faces" means. The gods cannot answer us until we have faces, until we are willing to be fully seen, fully uncovered, fully real. Not the version we present to the world, not the person shaped by fear or pride or trauma, but the one formed in love before time began. This book did not resolve all my questions, but it did reveal something sacred, that our greatest healing comes not in understanding God, but in trusting Him. That love to be divine must be free. That grief to be redeemed must be honest. That judgment, when finally seen through the lens of mercy, becomes a kind of fire that purifies, not punishes. You are not too late to be seen. You are not too lost to be found. You are not too far gone to be brought home. But the home you long for is not built on pride. It is built on truth, and truth requires courage. You stayed angry because it felt like armor. You remained bitter because it felt like justice. But neither one can take you where God wants to lead you. Only love can. The kind of love that wounds in order to heal. The kind that breaks in order to rebuild. The kind that takes your old name and gives you a new one. You are not just a character in someone else's myth. You are a soul with a divine story. And though it may take decades, though it may pass through silence, though it may wrestle with shadows, there will come a moment where you too hear the voice say, "Now you are ready." And you will lift your eyes, you will drop your disguise, and you will discover you were never unloved, only unready. Till We Have Faces was not written for the crowds. It was written for the soul who has tried everything and still feels unseen. For the one who has shouted into the void and heard no answer. For the one who thought love meant control and now is learning that it means release. You are not unloved. You are unfinished. You are not silenced. You are being prepared. You are not alone. You are awaited. And the face that looks back at you scarred, tired searching, may yet become radiant. You are not your complaint. You are not your disguise. You are His. And when you speak not with bitterness but with bare honesty, you will not be met with wrath. You will be met with welcome, face to face. At last, I did not set out to write mere Christianity as a scholar or theologian. I spoke first as a man who had once dismissed God entirely. I knew what it was to believe that faith was a crutch, that religion was sentimental poetry for the weak. And so, when war came both in the world and in my own soul, it was not certainty I offered. It was search. It was honesty. It was the sound of a man tracing the edges of truth, with trembling fingers and discovering that the shape was not imaginary, but eternal. The original words were not written, they were spoken into the static of BBC radio broadcasts during the Second World War, into homes lit dimly by candlelight, into the hearts of soldiers, skeptics, and seekers. And through that microphone, I did not preach a denomination. I extended a hand. I invited listeners not into argument, but into awareness, not into dogma, but into discovery. You are not asked to believe blindly. You are invited to follow reason to its rightful conclusion. A path that, if walked fully, does not end in logic but in love. You are not unreasonable for questioning faith. You are not rebellious for wrestling with doctrine. You are human, and at the core of every human is a hunger, not for opinion, but for meaning, not for comfort, but for clarity. That is where mere Christianity begins. Not in the clouds, but in the gut. Not in religion, but in reality. I began with the moral law, because I had come to believe that deep within each of us is a haunting awareness of ought, that some things are just wrong, that justice exists whether we live up to it or not. You stayed silent when others were wronged and something inside you grieved. You remained kind in moments when cruelty would have felt justified. Why? Because there is a law not written by culture, not shifted by history, a law older than empires, deeper than psychology. This law points not to human invention, but to divine origin. You are not merely instinct. You are image. You are not a chance arrangement of atoms. You are a crafted soul. And if there is a moral law, then there is a lawgiver. One not silent, not far, but close enough to convict the conscience and kind enough to shape it. But this God, He is not tame. You see, I believed in Him before I ever wanted to love Him. He was unsettling. He disrupted my comforts. He shattered my excuses. You are not encountering a passive deity. You are encountering a blazing fire who also calls Himself Father. And in that paradox lies the mystery of faith. You stayed skeptical because too many voices offered too many truths. You remained distant because the church often felt like noise. But mere Christianity was not an invitation to a system. It was an invitation to a person. Christ not as symbol, not as myth, but as the startling center of reality. The only one who dared to say, not just follow me, but I am the way. It wasn't just morality that pointed me there. It was my own failure to keep it. The more I tried to be good, the more I realized I could not heal what was broken inside me. That is the ache behind every chapter. You are not just imperfect, you are in need. Not just of improvement, but of resurrection. Christ does not merely teach us how to live. He makes us new. He does not simply forgive the sinner. He recreates the human. You are not called to behave better. You are called to become someone else, someone radiant with the life of the very God who made you. And this does not begin with effort. It begins with surrender. I wrote of pride because I knew it too well. It is the great sin, the one that hides behind religion, behind virtue, behind success. You are not more spiritual because you look composed. You are not closer to God because others admire your goodness. Real faith begins when the mask drops. When you say, "I cannot fix myself," that is not weakness. That is the door to grace. And grace is not a theory. It is a force. It reaches into the cracks. It breathes life where shame once lived. You are not too sinful to be transformed. You are not too late to be loved. You are not a lost cause. You are His. But the path of Christ is not easy. It is not self-help with a halo. It is death and rebirth. It is laying down everything you thought made you strong and trusting that the Spirit will build something better in its place. Not a better version of you, a new creation. You stayed clinging to the old because it felt safe. You remained in familiar chains. But now the door is open, and the life Christ offers is not borrowed, it is birthed. I ended those broadcasts not with finality, but with invitation. Because mere Christianity is not a conclusion, it is a crossroads. You must decide not whether God is real, but whether you will let Him be real in you. You are not just reading a case. You are being called. You are not too wounded to respond. You are not too logical to believe. You are not too complicated for grace. You are the one He still waits for. You are the one He still calls beloved. And you are not alone in this journey. Faith is not a fortress for the fearless. It is a home for the humbled. You do not need to have all the answers. You need only to say yes to the one who does. And in that yes, a life begins bolder than belief, deeper than doubt. A life not built on theory, but on the Word who became flesh, the Word who speaks still. To you, now, you are not a spectator. You are the one He sees, the one He died for, the one He rose for. You are not trying to become worthy. You are learning that in Him you already are. That is mere Christianity. Not a doctrine but a door. Not a summary but a surrender. And yes, you are invited to walk through it. Pain was never an abstract concept to me. It was not merely a philosophical curiosity nor a theological puzzle to be debated in ivory towers. It was something I had felt, sharp, silent, lingering, and for a long time it stood as my greatest argument against God. If He is good, why is the world riddled with sorrow? If He is powerful, why does He remain still while we bleed? It wasn't rebellion that asked these questions, it was heartbreak. And that is where the problem of pain was born, not in defiance, but in longing for clarity when the world felt unbearable. I did not write it as a man immune to suffering. I wrote it as one who had seen enough of it to know that platitudes fail. I had seen war. I had seen loss. And I had seen the silent confusion in the eyes of those who prayed and still suffered. So I sought to trace a path, however narrow, however trembling, through that shadowed valley. Not to silence the ache, but to seek understanding within it. The first step was to admit what many hesitate to say: you are not alone in your pain. You are not forgotten in your affliction. The world is not as it should be. Something is fractured. Something is missing. And that something, I came to believe, is not an absence of love, but a distortion of it. You stayed through nights of unanswered prayers. You remained even when it felt like hope was thinning. and though it seemed heaven was silent, you were never abandoned. Pain, I came to see, is not the contradiction of God's goodness. It is the consequence of our freedom. We are not puppets. We are persons, made in the image of a God who loves us enough to give us the power to choose, and in that choosing the capacity to wound and be wounded. It wasn't cruelty. It was dignity. But dignity carries danger. We can love, and we can destroy. But this is not the end of the story. God does not leave the world spinning on the axis of its own brokenness. He enters it. He feels it. And more than that, He redeems it. The same God who allows pain does not remain untouched by it. He bears it. He weeps with us, bleeds for us, walks beside us through the fire He never intended to be permanent. You are not too broken to be held. You are not too bruised to be seen. You are not forgotten when the answer delays. In fact, the delay may be the very soil in which your strength is growing. I wrote that pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world, not because He delights in seeing us suffer, but because comfort often lulls us into forgetfulness. It was never about punishment. It was about awakening. But I must confess, the words I penned in The Problem of Pain were theory. They were the scaffolding of reason, built around a mystery far deeper than logic can touch. Years later, when I lost the one I loved most, I learned what those words truly meant. In theory, I had tried to explain why God allows pain. In grief, I began to understand how He redeems it. You are not alone in your questioning, but your questions are not weapons, they are invitations. God is not offended by your ache. He is moved by it. And though He may not always explain Himself, He never withholds Himself. That is the difference. That is the hope. That is the whisper that remains when every answer feels far away. We often think pain is the enemy, but sometimes it is the chisel, the refining fire, the voice that calls us to wake, to shift, to return. You are not being punished. You are being prepared, not for ease, but for eternity, not for applause, but for holiness. And holiness, though it costs, always gives more than it takes. The human soul, I believe, was not designed for self-sufficiency. We try. We build our walls. We make our plans. But when pain strikes, it strips us of illusions. It reveals what we've trusted. And if we've trusted anything other than grace, it will crumble. Yet you stayed standing, even if barely. You remained faithful, even if quietly. And that is the strength heaven honors. I wrote The Problem of Pain to say what many feel and few dare admit, that belief in a good God does not shield us from sorrow, but it does anchor us through it. You are not called to pretend. You are called to persevere, and that perseverance, though hidden, though uncelebrated, is a song of worship louder than any praise sung in comfort. You are not your suffering. You are the soul being shaped within it. You are not the sum of your losses. You are the story still being written through them. You are not forsaken. You are refined, not discarded, but deeply, painfully, beautifully known. Pain changes you. That is inevitable, but it does not have to define you. It can deepen you. It can draw you. It can clarify what matters. And in those moments when you feel stripped bare, remember, He is not building your comfort. He is building your character. And character forged in sorrow becomes unshakable in joy. The road will not always make sense, but the cross reminds us that God does not shy away from suffering. He transforms it. You are not walking toward a distant God. You are walking with a God who chose nails and thorns and agony, not because He had to, but because you were worth it. You are not forgotten. You are beloved. So, if you are in the midst of the pain, if your prayers feel heavy, if your nights are long, know this: you are not weak for weeping. You are not less spiritual for grieving. You are a child being held by the very hands that shape the stars. And those hands do not tremble when they hold your scars. It wasn't abandonment. It was alignment. It wasn't vengeance. It was vision, something deeper being formed than comfort could ever produce. You are not being undone. You are being rebuilt, brick by sacred brick, not in the absence of pain, but in its very presence. That is the problem of pain, not an answer, but a journey, not a cure, but a compass. And if it brings you even one step closer to the God who suffers with you, then it has done its work. You are not lost. You are led. You are not broken beyond use. You are being molded for glory. You are not forgotten. You are His. And that truth, burning even in the fire, will remain. I never believed in miracles because they were convenient. I believed in them because reality, when truly examined, demands them. There was a time when I saw the universe as a closed system, silent, predictable, governed entirely by cause and effect. But I learned through both reason and revelation that the material is not the whole. It never was. You are not just a body. You are spirit clothed in matter. And this world, though governed by order, is not sealed shut. The author has stepped into the story. And when he does, what we call a miracle is not a violation. It is an unveiling. Miracles was written to say what logic alone cannot feel, and what experience alone cannot always prove, that the supernatural is not unnatural. It is the most natural thing there is. The invasion of the eternal into time is not disruption. It is restoration. It is not chaos. It is the kingdom reminding creation who it truly belongs to. I knew before writing the objections that miracles are myths, that belief in them is weakness, that science has disproved them. But science, for all its brilliance, can only describe what happens under the laws it studies. It cannot say what lies beyond them. You are not irrational for believing in something bigger. You are not naive for hoping that the veil might part. You are responding to a truth deeper than data, a longing older than time. The first miracle is not water turned to wine or a man walking on water. The first miracle is this: that anything exists at all, that something called you into being, that you, with all your aches and doubts, are not an accident. That is wonder. That is miracle. And if that is possible, then all others follow. But still we resist. We say, why doesn't God just act more clearly? Or why not more often? But miracles are not spectacles. They are signs. They are not meant to impress. They are meant to invite. They are not about defying nature. They are about revealing its deeper purpose. A miracle, when it comes, is not a God showing off. It is a Father calling home. You are not forgotten in the quiet seasons. You are not unloved when the sea remains still. But sometimes, just sometimes, the waves still themselves because He whispers. Sometimes the bread multiplies. Sometimes the tomb opens. And when that happens, it does not cancel reason, it completes it. You stayed praying even when answers were slow. You remained faithful even when nothing shifted. And that too is miracle. Because faith, true faith, is not built on signs. It is what remains when signs fade. And trust must take over. One of the hardest things I had to face was this: we do not believe in miracles because they make life easier. We believe in them because they make life holy. They remind us that God is not watching from a distance. He is stepping into dirt, into blood, into breath. He is not appalled by the material. He is the one who spoke it into being. And now He enters it not as disruption, but as the return of the King to His kingdom. You are not the sum of what your eyes can see. You are not chained to gravity. You are a soul that knows deep within that there is more, that something waits behind the veil, that pain is not the final word, that death is not the end, and miracle is the moment when that more touches down and says, I am here. We live in a skeptical age. We glorify logic and mock mystery. But even the skeptic aches for beauty, for hope, for intervention. You are not wrong to hope for the impossible. You are simply remembering that eternity was written in your bones. You are not reaching for fantasy. You are being drawn to reality at its most glorious depth, and the greatest miracle of all incarnation, that God Himself took on flesh, that He walked among us, not as a king in robes, but as a carpenter, as a lamb. As the silence broken by mercy, the incarnation changes everything. If He can enter history once, He can do it again. If He can raise His Son, He can raise your hope. If He can step into time, He can still step into your story. You are not beyond the reach of that miracle. You are not disqualified by your questions. You are not too late to witness wonder. But here is the truth. I came to see miracles don't often come when we demand them. They come when we surrender. Not because they are rewards for good behavior, but because they are woven into the fabric of grace. You stayed searching when others gave up. You remained open when cynicism felt easier. And that openness, raw, honest, holy, is the soil in which miracle takes root. You are not empty. You are expectant, not foolish, but faithful. And if God has done it before, He will do it again. Not always in the way you asked, but always in the way you need. In writing miracles, I didn't seek to impress. I sought to reason with the honest heart, to say you do not have to throw away your intellect to follow Christ, but neither can you worship intellect as if it holds the keys to everything. Reason is a guide, but grace is the gate. And when grace opens, miracle walks in. You are not living in a world abandoned. You are walking on sacred ground. You are not overlooked. You are observed, not by chance, but by choice. And the one who observes you loves you, not distantly, but personally. The same hand that turned water to wine can touch your ordinary and make it holy. So if you are waiting, don't despair. The waiting may be the womb of wonder. The silence may be the stage on which heaven prepares to speak. And even if no fire falls from the sky, today remember the God of miracle is already with you. His presence is the first miracle. His love is the greatest. And His promise remains. You are not unseen. You are not alone. You are not a fool for believing. You are a witness in the making. It wasn't a book about exceptions to the rules. It was a book about a God who writes the rules and steps in, not to undo them, but to fulfill them in glory. And if you find yourself praying with trembling hands, hoping for what feels impossible, you are not weak. You are the very one miracles were made for. Love, I came to learn, is not a single flame. It is a constellation. Each light burns differently. Some warm, some wound, all reveal. When I wrote the Four Loves, I was not trying to craft a tidy theology. I was trying to understand my own soul. I was asking why we need each other so deeply, and why love at its best both comforts and consumes. Why it lifts us to joy, yet leaves us vulnerable to ache. It wasn't sentiment I was after. It was clarity. It wasn't romance. It was reality. In this work, I named 4: affection, friendship, eros, and charity. Each one essential. Each one flawed unless refined by something higher. They are not stages. They are not ranked like rungs on a ladder. They are facets, windows through which we both give and receive. You are not strange for needing all 4. You are not broken because one has failed you. You are human. And the longing that lives within you to be seen, to be known, to be chosen, that longing was placed there by design. Affection comes first, the most humble, the most familiar. It is the love of the everyday, the glance of a mother, the smell of an old coat, the loyalty of a dog who does not care if you've spoken in hours. It grows not from fireworks but from shared silence. It says, I know you not because I chose you, but because we simply stayed. You are not forgotten if you lack grand gestures. You are not unloved because no one shouts your name. Sometimes the truest love is quiet, domestic, faithful in the background. Then there is friendship so often neglected in our age. Not the shallow companionship of social convenience, but the kind that says I see the same truth, and we walk toward it together. Friendship is not face to face. It is side by side. It does not demand. It recognizes. It does not clutch. It celebrates. You stayed loyal when others drifted. You remained steadfast when the crowd turned cold. And that constancy, that choice to keep standing beside someone in pursuit of the same light that is sacred. Eros, then, what the world so often distorts. Not lust, not possession, but the love that says, you are my beloved. You are beautiful not just to my eyes but to my being. It is the thunder of longing, the ache to be joined. It can elevate, but without grace it can consume. You are not wrong for longing to be desired. You are not unworthy because love has wounded you. But no, this Eros is never safe unless it kneels. It must bow to a higher flame, or it will burn you hollow. It wasn't given to enslave. It was meant to illuminate. And finally, there is charity agape, the love that does not wait to be deserved, the love that does not require return. It gives freely, fiercely, fully. It is the love of Christ, the only love not drawn from us but poured into us. It does not replace the others. It transforms them. Affection becomes deeper. Friendship becomes purer. Eros becomes holier. You are not too far for this love. You are not too stained. You are not too cold. This love is not earned. It is extended. And it is this love and only this love that will endure forever. But love, I discovered, is not safe. It exposes. It opens. And it asks for everything. The one who loves most deeply is the one who risks most painfully. To love at all is to be vulnerable. To wrap your heart in armor is to preserve it in loneliness. You are not weak because you've been hurt. You are not foolish because you opened the door. You are brave. You are true. You are the one who believed that love was still worth it. You stayed even when love disappointed. You remained even when affection grew distant, friendship grew quiet, romance grew weary. And that staying, that refusal to close your heart completely, is the mark of a soul still alive. You are not made to protect your heart at all costs. You are made to reflect the heart of God, even if it breaks you. And here is the mystery I wrestled with as I wrote: the more you love, the more you suffer. But the more you love, the more you live. It wasn't a contradiction. It was the paradox of heaven. You are not meant to float above pain. You are meant to love through it. Because every form of love, if surrendered, becomes a mirror of the divine. The world will tell you love is about gain, about pleasure, about power. But Christ tells us love is about giving, about sacrifice, about laying down your life. You are not too empty to love like that. You are not too late to begin again. You are not too hardened to feel again. You are His, and He has loved you first, not when you were lovely, but while you were still lost. This is what I tried to offer through the four loves, not an answer for the ache, but a lens to see it more clearly. You are not alone in your longing. You are not mistaken in your hunger for connection. You were made in the image of the triune, the eternal circle of love, and that design echoes in every part of you. So, if you are wondering whether love is still worth the risk, I say this: it is. It always is. Not because it won't break you, but because it will build you. You are not called to close your heart. You are called to expand it. Not called to demand perfection, but to practice mercy. Not called to be untouched, but to be transformed. You are not forgotten. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are the one He loves, the one He came for, the one He delights in. You are not just invited to love, you are invited to become it. And when all else fails, when all else fades, this remains love, not as the world gives, but as He does, free, unshakable, holy, and in that love you are home. Grief does not announce itself. It does not arrive with answers or explanations. It crashes in sudden, raw indifference to your theology. When joy died, the world did not feel poetic. It felt hollow, brutal. The God I had trusted became a silence I could not explain. And the book that followed, A Grief Observed, was not a work of craft. It was not written to be read. It was written because I could not hold the ache inside my chest. It was a cry, a confession, a scratching down of truth when all the answers I once offered others no longer held weight for me. I had written of pain before, but this was different. This was not the pain of theory. It was the pain of presence, her presence now gone. It wasn't about philosophy. It was about the echo of her footsteps missing from the hallway. The sound of her laugh vanished. The sudden, cruel rearrangement of the world without her in it. You are not too strong to break like that. You are not too spiritual to ache when love is torn away. You are not too faithful to ask why. What I found in those first days was that grief is not tidy. It is not reverent. It does not wait for you to feel ready. It rages. It mocks. It strips you bare. You stayed upright when the ground gave way. You remained standing in a world you no longer recognized, and that I now know is its own kind of worship. Not the joyful praise of the mountaintop, but the trembling endurance of the valley. I did not doubt God's existence, but I did doubt His goodness. That was the shock. Not that He seemed far, but that He had once seemed close. That now, in the deepest need, I found not comfort but silence, not peace but absence. And I wrote it down. Every word, every accusation, every moment I looked toward heaven and found nothing but a locked door. But as the pages turned, I began to see something. Not clearly, not quickly, but truly, that God had not left. He had drawn nearer than I could comprehend. Not with noise, but with presence. Not with answers, but with companionship. And I began to understand faith is not the absence of pain. It is what survives when all else collapses. You are not less holy because you weep. You are not failing because your faith trembles. You are human. You are hurting, and you are seen. You stayed even when comfort felt false. You remained even when hope grew thin. That is courage. That is love refusing to die with the body. As I walked through the months after Joy's death, I realized something deeper still. Grief is not the enemy of love. It is its twin. You grieve because you loved, and the deeper the love, the deeper the ache. It wasn't weakness, it was proof. Proof that something eternal had touched something mortal, and the soul, when torn by such beauty, bleeds. The world urges you to move on quickly, to tidy up your sorrow, to smile for the sake of others. But grief is not something you conquer. It is something you carry. And with time, the weight does not vanish, but you grow strong enough to bear it, not alone, but with the strength only God can give. You are not called to forget. You are called to remember with reverence, and to believe impossibly that joy will rise again. Grief, in its own terrible way, clarifies. It strips away illusions. It exposes what is real. I learned to pray not because I felt holy, but because I had no other place to turn. And slowly, gently, the silence gave way, not to explanations, but to a presence, a warmth, a whisper. Not "this is why," but "I am still here." You are not abandoned. You are not punished. You are not alone in your sorrow. God does not always shield us from suffering, but He does sit in it with us. You are not speaking into the void. Your pain is not dismissed in heaven. It is gathered, counted, and one day, somehow it will be redeemed. The hardest thing I faced in writing A Grief Observed was not the pain, it was the unmaking of the image I had of God. The God I wanted was safe, predictable. The God I encountered was not. He was wild, untamed, fierce in love, yet fierce still. I could not control him, but I could trust him, not because I understood him, but because in the dark, he never let me go. You are not too shattered to be held. You are not too wounded to be restored. You are not forgotten in your loneliness. You are the child whose every tear is recorded, every sigh known, every silence shared. You stayed when you wanted to vanish. You remained when leaving would have been easier. And that staying, that painful choosing to live again, is grace. One day I began to remember joy not just as loss, but as gift. I began to smile through the tears, not because the pain had left, but because love remained. I was never promised a life without suffering. I was promised a God who would walk with me through it. And that promise, though it does not erase grief, transforms it. A grief observed is not a how-to. It is not a solution. It is a mirror. It is the cry of a man laid bare before God. And if you find yourself in its pages, trembling, weeping, wondering, then know this: you are not less because you mourn. You are closer to truth than you realize. You are not too broken to love again. You are not too far gone to believe again. You are not forgotten in your tears. You are the beloved in the wilderness. And though the night may last long, dawn will come. Though the ache may never fully leave, neither will he. You are not just observing grief. You are surviving it, transforming in it, becoming through it. And in that becoming, you are not alone. You are not abandoned. You are held, always. It wasn't fame that built the Inklings. It wasn't formality or fanfare. It was friendship, formed in quiet corners of Oxford, around fires, over pipes, in the worn leather chairs of a pub called the Eagle and Child. It was not an institution. It was a fellowship, not a club with minutes and rules, but a gathering of souls, each burning with stories, with questions, with God-haunted longings too weighty to carry alone. We met to read aloud, to challenge and encourage, to dissect and to defend. But more than that, we met to listen. Because in those rooms, beneath the laughter and disagreement, something holy stirred. You are not made to walk alone. You are not designed to bear your imagination in silence. There are people, rare but real, who will hear your voice and call forth something eternal from within you. Tolkien was there always, careful, always precise. His words did not tumble. They marched deliberate, as if each carried the weight of ancient truth. Charles Williams, brilliant, wild, intense. He spoke like a prophet, half in this world, and half in some cathedral you couldn't see. There were others too, Barfield, Dyson, Havard. Each brought a flame, and together we became more than writers. We became a forge. It wasn't perfection that united us. It was passion. It was pursuit. We argued fiercely, but we never abandoned. We critiqued with sharp edges, but we never withdrew love. And in that tension, truth was tempered. You stayed when others grew distant. You remained even when misunderstood. That is what fellowship means, not agreement, but devotion. You are not too strange to belong. You are not too different to be heard. There is a table waiting for you where your questions won't be silenced and your gifts won't be measured against applause. The Inklings gave me that kind of space. A room where belief was not a requirement, but a rhythm. Where theology and fantasy could sit side by side. Where faith was explored, not enforced. And it changed me. Before those meetings, I believed ideas alone could carry truth. But around those friends, I saw how story could do what argument never could slip past the mind and into the marrow. It wasn't the lectures that stayed with me. It was the nights Tolkien read a chapter from A Tale of a Ring. It was the evening Charles spoke of substitution and the mysticism of love. It was the sacred hush that fell when something beautiful had been spoken, and no one dared break it with speech. You are not forgotten if your voice shakes. You are not too broken to bring light. You may not have a stage, but your words still matter. They mattered in that room, in that circle, and they matter now. The Inklings did not seek greatness. We sought truth, and truth, once spoken in love, has a way of echoing through generations. We brought our half-finished work. We read through embarrassment. We were corrected, challenged, sharpened, but always we were seen. You stayed even when the feedback stung. You remained even when the pages bled with revision. That is how art is born, not in solitude, but in sacred community. You are not meant to create alone. Creation is communion, the Word made flesh reflected in every word you dare to shape in love. The Inklings reminded me that imagination is not the enemy of doctrine, it is its doorway. That a dragon slain in story can reveal the cross more clearly than a sermon. That laughter shared in fellowship can open the soul to God more than 1,000 solemn phrases. It wasn't about building empires. It was about building each other. It wasn't about being heard by the world. It was about being understood by one another. And from that quiet circle came tales that still travel far, rings and wardrobes, and invisible wars of spirit. Not because we sought legacy, but because we stayed faithful to the work and to each other. You are not too small to shape eternity. You are not too late to begin. You are not disqualified because your vision does not yet have form. You are a bearer of something sacred, and all you need, perhaps, is a room like we had, a voice who says, keep going, write that again. You've touched something true. The Inklings were never formalized, but they were fire. They were fuel. And they taught me that iron sharpens iron, but only when it stays close. You do not grow by hiding. You do not deepen by pretending. You grow by showing up again and again, bringing your questions, your chapters, your ache, and in return receiving the blessing of being fully known. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are not outside the circle. You are the one still writing in hope, still seeking with wonder, still daring to believe. And that, yes, that is the beginning of something holy, something worthy, something that even now heaven leans in to hear. So, if you find your tribe, honor it. If you find your circle, protect it. If you find your voice, share it. Because someone in that room, maybe even you, carries a word that will awaken the world. That's what the Inklings gave me. Not applause, not fame, but fellowship, fire, faith. And that is enough to change everything. If your heart is stirred, if something within you has awakened, then now is the moment to respond. This is not about emotion. It's not about performance. It's about presence. God is not waiting for perfect words. He is waiting for a willing heart. Perhaps you've walked through long seasons of silence. Perhaps you've doubted, feared, wandered. But still, He has not turned His face from you. He is here, ready to meet you not with judgment but with grace. This is a sacred moment, a turning point, a crossing from self-sufficiency into surrender, from confusion into clarity, from striving into trust. Wherever you are, physically or spiritually, you are not beyond the reach of His love. Bow your head, quiet your soul, and join me now. Not in ritual, but in relationship. Let us pray not to be heard by men, but to be held by the heart of God. Father in heaven, you who are ancient and yet ever new, Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, we come before you, not with eloquence, but with hunger. We come not as those who understand everything, but as those who have tasted enough of this world to know we need more. We are tired of shadows. We are weary from illusions. We long for substance. We long for you. You know our hearts. You see the weight we carry, some visible, some buried deep, where no one else can find them. You see the fears we hide, the questions we silence, the hopes we've nearly stopped daring to believe. Yet you do not turn away. You draw near. You remain constant when all else shifts. So today, God, we turn toward you not with polished faith, but with honest surrender. We bring our cracked vessels, believing you can still pour glory into them. Forgive us, Lord, for the moments we've trusted our strength more than your Spirit. For the times we measured ourselves by the opinions of men instead of the truth of your word. For the ways we've sought control instead of communion. We repent not out of guilt, but out of love, not because you demand perfection, but because you deserve our whole hearts. Cleanse us, renew us, teach us again how to delight in your presence more than in performance. God, awaken in us a strength we didn't know we had, the kind of strength that kneels before it stands, the kind of courage that listens before it speaks, the kind of faith that walks even when the path is hidden. We don't ask for a life without storms. We ask for peace in the midst of them. We don't ask to be spared from fire. We ask to walk through it and come out refined. Breathe on our dry bones. Speak life to the places that have grown numb. Birth in us a holy fire, not one that burns out, but one that burns through. For those who feel forgotten, remind them that you write their names on the palms of your hands. For those battling disappointment, whisper again that your timing is perfect. For those weighed down by shame, cover them now in the robe of righteousness. You do not abandon wounded hearts. You bind them. You do not discard broken stories. You redeem them. We pray for vision, for spiritual eyes that see beyond the noise, for spiritual ears that discern your whisper, even in the chaos. We ask not just for open doors, but for the wisdom to walk through the right ones. We ask not just for favor, but for character to carry it well. Align our hearts with heaven's rhythm. Shape our desires to match your will. And now, Lord, we speak hope over the valleys. We speak restoration over the ruins. We speak purpose over every past pain. You waste nothing. Not one tear, not one delay, not one silent night. You are the God who works all things together for good, not always quickly, but always perfectly. So we choose trust. We choose belief. We choose to worship even while we wait. We yield, God, fully, deeply. Even when we don't understand, we say yes. Not because the road is easy, but because you are enough. Be our portion. Be our peace. Be the fire in our bones and the stillness in our breath. We say again, you are Lord. You are holy. You are good. And as we leave this prayer, don't let us leave your presence. Let it linger. Let it cover. Let it lead. We are yours, entirely, forever. In the name of Jesus, our Savior, our Shepherd, our strength, we pray. Amen. Whether delivering a message, breaking chains, or standing silent in the shadows, God's work is constant. Even when you do not feel it, even when the heavens seem still, the eternal hand is moving. Not out of chance, not in chaos, but by divine calling. Heaven does not respond to noise, it responds to faith. The turning of your heart, the lifting of your eyes, the whisper of surrender. These are the signals heaven reads. You are not abandoned in your waiting. You are being positioned, shaped, prepared for glory that does not waver when the wind rises. His work in you is not occasional, it is ongoing. So today, this very day, choose to act from that truth, trust in it, stand on His word, move with confidence knowing who goes before you. You are not waiting to be chosen. You have already been called. not for a life of smallness but of sacred strength. Pray again even if your voice trembles. Worship again even if your hands are heavy. Think higher, not because life has been kind, but because God has been constant. This is not a season for passivity. It is a summons into purpose. What you believe today will shape what you step into tomorrow. Choose to believe well. Now lift your eyes. Can you feel it? The veil is thinner than you thought. The presence closer than your doubt ever admitted. Angels stand stationed not at a distance but around you. Light is not far off. It is pressing in. What felt like delay was orchestration. What felt like absence was preparation. The glory has not forgotten your address. The heavens have not misplaced your name. You are seen, beloved, and commissioned. The assignment is not ahead, it has already begun. This moment is not a pause. It is a passage. The ground is holy, the air is charged, the kingdom is advancing. So walk by faith, not by sight, and know that you are never out of His reach.